Today we're talking about Japanese stencil paper and the uses of it. It was developed in the Edo period in Japan. One of the first uses of the paper was with a little awl which cut circles. These circles were designed in different configurations, and they were used for identification on the back of the samurai top coat with the winged arms. The kamishimo, right at the back of the neck, is where it was placed. And after that developed, that became like a crest for the family. The next stage in it was that overall stencils were cut of a similar technique of cutout holes. And they're called komon stencils, K-O-M-O-N. And they were the first large stencils. It went from the samurai class to the theater, kabuki theater, used the komon designs that were worn by male actors to signify women. Very complicated scene. Then women in the middle class community liked the look so much they wanted to wear those komon garments. And even today there are a lot of komon designed kimonos in Kyoto especially. So the origins are very interesting and complex. The paper developed was a mulberry paper, and it's made in Shiroko, a tiny village in Mie Prefecture, not too far from Nara. And the whole village is dedicated to the making of stencil and to the cutting of them. And I was able to go there many years ago and see the whole process. The stencils are placed on large boards and laminated between layers with fermented persimmon juice. They are put out into the sunshine where the boards dry, paper becomes dry, and then they're taken into a smokehouse for 10 days. And when they come out of this smokehouse, they smell very spicy, very persimmon-like, kind of a cinnamon odor. And they last in the paper for a long time, sometimes years. And there are many ways of designing, including drawing right on the stencil, as in this case. Or you can draw out figure shapes. So I have some examples here of just shapes that I've cut out to explore. And then you can quickly trace those onto a piece of paper or other stencil paper and find out how that could repeat in different ways. So I'll just show you a little bit of that. So using a Japanese round brush with India ink, I can just lay it on the stencil carefully. And with a dry brush technique, you can print it right through to any other surface. So it's very, very useful for any kind of design process. So we've just printed that little bit there. So it's very, very useful for designing various things. Today, I've just cut this little figure out. And on this paper, I've shown how it breaks down into kind of a repeat. And so I've cut a whole section of how the figures come together. I'm satisfied with that. Then in this case, I'm just tracing it through with a pencil on the grid. So there are many ways of designing or setting it up, and there are some examples behind me which you can use for direct printing. You can use it for wax resist, or most commonly in Japan, it's for rice paste resist. In fact, a lot of the fabric done in Okinawa traditionally is done in these processes. And in Okinawa, they use particularly many, many layers of colors, like a printing process, so up to 12, 15 layers of colors. So they use resists, and they use printing inks, the whole complement of everything. So as far as cutting the stencil is concerned, you need, if possible, a soft cutting mat. Most of our mats are a bit hard here, so this is the Japanese one, self-healing, very soft. So when you cut into it, it self-heals. I want to show you the use of the cutting tools. Let me show you two different things. First of all, with the awl, you can buy various sizes, and on the top you can see various sizes already cut. This is a very tiny one, and so perpendicular again, and then you press and cut by turning. It's not a stamp, it's an awl, so you have to cut it. And the blade is very, very sharp, so it cuts very nicely. This is the smallest of all of the cutters. Trying it again, rotating. Okay, and that's how it's done. Then with the knife, place it precisely in the corner, the edge of your cut, then move it very carefully towards you. Stop and don't overcut your edge. Cut the next line as precisely. Take your time, then move the paper so that you can cut it in the direction of your normal movement. One more cut, and then you can just pick out the paper. So that's basically how simple it is to use the paper and the cutting knives. After cutting the stencil, you can back it with a gauze, and that'll be the next process that I show you. We're backing the stencil today, and to do this we need marine enamel, a small roller, clean up turpentine, and we have scissors and lots of newspaper. So the first step is to attach the stencil onto a padded table of 3 or 4 sheets of newsprint, but you just want to attach it about 1/8 of an inch on the corners. That's to stabilize it. So we've cut the gauze 1/2 an inch larger than the format of the stencil. We pick up a corner. Now we need to soak it. We need to get rid of the static electricity. So you pick up a corner and spray it down. So you can see it relaxes right away. Then it's not going to be jumping at you. So we have padded newspaper here that's quite wet, and we're going to lay this down in the middle somewhere. Make sure the grain is straight. We put the top back over it just to cover. We can leave this for up to 10 minutes while we're getting ready to get the palette ready. So I'm going to get a little bit of the enamel on the palette, just a little. And the roller, okay. Then I have a paper very sharply folded in the middle, which I will be placing here to support the gauze. So I think I'm ready to start. Get the roller ready. I want to move quickly once I bring the gauze out before the static electricity returns to it. So grab it. It's always hard to find. You can see how comfortable it is now. It doesn't want to move around. So place it, then start right away in the middle with this support paper. Get even distribution in the roller. Start right in the middle and go right from this point to the end of the gauze every time. And you want to finish a section as you go. So I need to move my hand here to work on this side because I'm supporting the gauze. I'm going to go over to this side, hold the gauze in place. And back to the side again. Finish off on the right side. Need a little bit more of the enamel. Okay, then I'm just going to get rid of this. Now I can finish this part, and it's being supported more or less now by the enamel. So we just need to finish from the center line. Every time you roll, it must be from this point to the edge of the gauze. Otherwise, you'll pick up the gauze if you stop anywhere between. From the center out. Okay, make sure you finish completely. Usually goes very smoothly. Okay, we've done that part. Now I want to lift the stencil from the tape. There, we've freed that corner, that one. That one's stuck a little more. There we go. So we've done that. Now I want to touch up the corners just a little bit. Now we have to clean the stencil, so we use a sheet of wet paper. We place the wet paper on the top edge, even with the stencil. The next step is to pick up the gauze in the stencil. Get under the stencil. Grab the corners, pull, and then with a smooth action, like that, turn it over. So we're pretty much finished. We need dry newspaper to clean. So wet on the wet side, dry on the dry side. It's easily cleaned by quickly rubbing the surface. Now we can pick it up on the dry side, set it down. We can have a look at it up to the light and see if it's clean. No droplets, so we're finished. This can go to an area that can be left for several hours. Make sure it sits for 8 or 12 hours before you use it. Basically, that's the process. This morning, Alisha and I are going to show you some of the various techniques for the use of a stencil, and they vary tremendously. And in Japan, they're used extensively for rice-based resist in Honshu, areas like Kyoto. But in Okinawa, they use the large sheets as a printing resist, or printing for direct application of dyes. So the bingata is the Okinawan styled printing with stencils. So various and all kinds of adaptations to the use of stencil. So I've set up one that I like to do this process a lot, which is just playing around with a stencil and taking it and moving it around, adjusting the image.
Building up layers.
Yes, and sort of partial transparencies. Of course, you can do it with any number of colors
Of course.
and go as deep as you want, including gold and other metallics as well. So I've just set up for...
And the backing we gave it gives it a really interesting texture too.
Yes, and this was damaged somewhat before I mounted it, so you can see it's not altogether pure and clean, but I kind of like the nature of
And it gives
the
you a
quality
variety of lines.
surface and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So what I do is make sure it's a dry brush technique. And for this you don't need to dampen the stencil because it's a very, very dry brush technique. So you can see how easy it is to apply. And I'm using that careful brush blending technique, bokashi technique really.
So like when we were dyeing our silk scarves, just the
Yes,
small
it's very
circles.
similar to the scarf technique, but it's really fun to do. And so you could use the edge of papers, you can use all kinds of things as a stencil. So that's how simple that is. So I'm going to keep working on this and build it up as a whole finished work.
Will you continue just with the NDA for this piece?
I think so.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think so.
Beautiful.
Because it's interesting. I might have whole areas that are more pale though.
Mhm.
I haven't decided yet exactly. So the next thing I've set up is to do a little print. So I have it, for this process, it does have to be dampened. So, and it's a little wet, so I also need to wipe the surface. You don't want any water on the surface at all. So where you see it damp, you can leave it under paper damp for 10-15 minutes quite easily, but don't let it dry out during the process. So I'm just going to print on a paper towel here. It's very easy to do. So I have very thick printing ink, which works really well, and the little squeegees, which are made from balsa wood. So just very simply.
Almost like your screen
Print it.
printing.
Yes, it is very much like screen printing. And I'm holding the spatula or squeegee very, very flat. Now, when you're using rice paste, it's very similar. Rice paste is extremely thick and sort of gooey, but it's very similar to the thickness I have here,
And it
which I
acts-
prefer. I don't like the very viscose ink for this kind of thing.
And then the rice paste would act as a resist that you could wash out
Yes.
as opposed to wax.
Yes, that's right, because when you steam it, in fact, the rice paste starts to deteriorate. And then you just wash it a bit more and you're finished. So that's that process. You can just put it back maybe. So I'll just set this over here.
That's a very clean image too.
It's very sharp, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
really sharp because of the dampness of the stencil.
Mm-hmm.
That's the secret to it, actually. So I have another one set up here just to show you. This is wet too, and it's gone a bit.
You can really smell the smoked pomegranate when
Can't
it's
you?
dampened.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I just wanted to show you a little bit of application of metallic. So this is a metallic gold powder in a textile base, so very useful. And with this technique, again, quite dry, but you can, this technique is quite wonderful because you can
Do you
leave
have to
it.
set the gold at all?
No, this is, you could kind of burnish it, but I
Beautiful.
love the effect of it.
That's really
It's really
sharp and beautiful.
Sharp and beautiful.
Yeah.
Again, it's because of the
Luxurious.
wetness of the stencil.
Yeah.
that's what it gives you. So try. I like to do portions of the actual shape, or change color and have another color. Yeah, it's quite effective. It's very effective when you're finishing a textile to put a little detail on top of a dyed piece and that kind of thing.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
like how we do it in ceramics too with our lusters.
yes.
It's our finished piece, and then you add your gold to accentuate.
Fantastic,
Yeah.
isn't it? So,
Beautiful.
Alisha, do you want to take over and show us some?
Yeah, sure. So using Bill's stencil technique, I brought it over to my ceramic practice, or I'm trying to. So I want to show you some of that today.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So this is just clay that I've rolled out and smoothed off. So it's just a slab, and this will fire white. And then I have my floral stencils and slip. So this is cobalt slip.
I see.
So there's cobalt in it.
Yes.
So when it fires, it'll turn bright blue. But taking my bamboo brushes
Sort of daubing it on.
and daubing it. This slip is very thick, but it's when you
need to
start.
get enough on, I would guess. Eh?
And when you start moving the slip, it actually starts to thin out almost.
Oh yes. But to make sure to get enough on, I guess.
Exactly.
Wow.
And with the clay, it's a bit more tedious getting clay onto it.
Yes.
And making sure it's all in there.
Consistent there. And then,
Yeah.
oh, there you are.
Yeah.
Great.
So it's not as sharp as yours.
Well, with more work, you probably could get it very sharp if you wanted to.
Exactly. But I don't mind the blended lines.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be necessarily sharp. does it?
And playing with how you did it, where you can just color Partial.
amounts too. Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
and let it fade out a little bit.
Yes.
I think can
Yeah,
look
no.
quite lovely
Oh,
too.
that's quite amazing. Yeah, that's great.
And then another way that I want it to utilize stencils is taking bisque ceramics. So this is, I already have my liner glaze in it. And taking my palette with colored glazes. So these are just ones that you can buy, but you could make your own as well.
Sure.
Taking a small amount of the colors.
That's great.
And placing it on.
Doing
And this is a
section.
little, this is a little bit more finicky because you have to play with sections, but it allows you to have very controlled glaze
That's amazing.
application.
Yeah, really amazing.
So I won't do
Of
this.
course, the dampness of the stencil helps
Yes, absolutely.
sharpen the edge too.
So just to show
Oh, isn't that
little
great?
sections, and
It's beautiful.
how I've been playing with it is I would let this dry, line it back up, and do the next, just because it's so finicky when you're playing with
Sure.
glaze.
Right.
But it doesn't take too long to dry, just a couple minutes.
So, and stencils have a particular look, don't they?
Yeah.
Which is very interesting.
They
With
do.
the outlining and,
And having to break things up into sections and
yes.
realizing that this is
Right.
one and then another.
Yes.
So
Yeah, it's great design, so.
thank you.
Good.
Yeah. So that's almost dry enough, so I could just place it back
Oh, it
on.
dries out quickly.
Oh, quite quickly,
Mhm.
and just keep
Just
working
Working. It
around.
does take a bit of time, but it's worth it.
Well, and if I were to do this by hand, it would take me
Yeah.
just as long, except I'd have to figure out where I want my things to be.
Yes.
So
Right.
this almost speeds it up.
Yeah, it speeds it up, for sure.
So you can see,
No.
it just keeps, you just keep working around your design
Sure.
section by section.
Great.
And I don't like wiping it off because it reminds me where I've been.
Oh,
Until
okay.
the end.
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
The record of doing it.
Exactly.
Right. Well, thank you. That's great.
And for me in my own ceramic work, it's all about playing and trying to find ways to build up texture. So everything that I'm learning in Fibre, I'm always trying to find ways to bring it back. And even the mordants that you
Yes,
use are
right, right.
oxides that I use in my
Yes,
own work.
right.
So the stencil just gave me a new tool for my toolbox to be able to
Yeah.
apply color and texture. And I hope that I see it going further.
Yes, in other directions
Yeah.
probably too, yeah. Well, it's really useful medium, isn't it? And
It is.
I love cutting them as well.
Oh, it's
So
very
just-
meditative. I'll just do it. I'll put a movie on and
Yeah.
cut out stencils.
Yes, yes,
Mm-hmm.
great, thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome.